Okay, so I was at work and I was thinking about this, thinking about this name thing issue that I keep having to deal with my mom and my aunt, you know, and even my counselor, my older counselor was like, she's like, they're going through that grieving process, don't forget to respect them going through that grieving process. But I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, I am not literally dead. Like, I'm still here. So I'm like, I understand that you're having a hard time. Like, but it just, why can't you give me the respect of calling me Dex? Like, to me, that really is offensive because I'm like, you really are not acknowledging any of the things that I've told you recently, and you're really caught up on that name. So let me explain to those of you who are non-transgender why it is that a name is so serious, okay? Because I told people it's the first step, and that's when I felt everything. I'm like, the name is the first step, and people just are like, it's just a name, and I'm like, no, it's not. Let me explain this to you, like in the best way that I can understand. When someone is born, it's up to your parents to give you that name. Now, everything in this world has a label on it, and that label attaches a meaning, okay? It attaches a denotation and a connotation. So if I say that this is a notebook, this is a notebook, okay? I'll get my signature, don't mind and stuff, but someone wanted to see my signature when I did the X and the F, so that's my current signature. I'm really kinesthetic. Anyway, old lady day. But the name is an issue, and I'm like, if you ask your parents why they named you what they did, they have a story, they have a reason for that. Okay, there was a meaning behind it, and there's an identity associated with every of these names. So if someone named you, like if you're named after a parent, if you're a junior, a third, the fourth in the line, you're named after a legacy. And your parents will tell you there's a reason that I chose this name because this name has certain significance and meaning to them that they want to oppose on you. And so I'm like, when you give a baby a name, you give them that name with that intention of that being an identifying marker for them for the rest of their life. That name has a certain meaning for you that you want them to have too, or them to gain a meaning of their name they can appreciate. Because then they, hopefully, which is what most parents think, will then apply their information and give their child a name that speaks to them. Okay? So when you give this child a name, the reason we give children names is so we have something to call them. And, we want them to have some kind of identity, you know. And people ask, why don't you let children choose their own names? And that's because they wouldn't be able to choose a name until you're talking, they get over the talk. And then it's a matter of, meaning and, why is it important for a name to have meaning? And again, it only has meaning if you put meaning on it. But the concern I'm trying to say is this, is that you gave them that meaning because you gave them that name because it has a meaning to you. And all the time they grow up, they have an expectation, they have a life, they have an association with that name. You've now partnered something with that name. If I say, like Ashley or Amber, they have people know an Ashley and Amber most of the case, and then they feel some type of way about it, you know. So you hear a certain name, you get a certain feeling about it, and so now you put that on that child. This is an identifying marker for them. So this name means this, okay? If your name is like Miles, okay, and people around you are into jazz, like they are at my job, then they will always refer to Miles, Davis, anything jazzy. And now you have that expectation and that history that is attached to that name connected to your life now. And so, because that name meant so much to you, can you now see how their name as a transgender person means a lot to them? I'm like, I don't know specifically what Dexter means. Okay, I'm like, and I wrote on the thing, 30-day trans challenge why I chose Dex, and someone pointed out something about the X in the IPA, which is the International Phonetics Association. I took linguistics vaguely, but yeah. So the original name when I started this video was Mordecai, Mordecai Menachem, and I like that as a spiritual name. But over the time, part of it was I realized that I was like, I don't want to have to go through this exhausting if I'm going to explain how to spell my name to everyone. I'm like, but at the same time, to me, that's very spiritual, that's very personal, it's very professional. I don't like that as a fun name, And my ex used to call me Dech. So I was like, I'm like, I can't get anyone to call me that. They would call me Detch when you see it spelled out. So I was like, what about Dex? Because it sounds closest to Detch. And so I liked it because it just sounded closer. And then we were taking linguistics, and then the sign for the sound is similar to an X. I think it's like a weak X or something. It looks like an X. So that sound would phonetically still mean Dech. It's just spelled Dex. You know what I'm saying? Similar. So I was like, okay, but to me, the name means something, because I have a shortened one that I can use for videos and for fun, and then I have Dexter, which I can use for professional. To me, it's not overtly professional, but it's not, to funny, like Ricky. You can't take anyone seriously, like if you're gonna be like a job, and it was like unless you're like famous, you can't take Ricky seriously. But Richard is always serious. Like it's not fun, you know what I'm saying? So to you, my mom was like, I gave you that name, and I'm like, yes. And she's like, I feel like you're tearing that all apart. I'm like, what you're no, I'm like, it's not the name that you feel I'm upsetting about. I'm like, what you're upset is that I'm tearing apart the identity that you gave me. When you give someone a name, you give them an identity. When you give them a nickname, you give them an identity. There's a story behind that nickname that you gave someone. There's an identity that you associate with that person. I mean, we used to have this weird pet thing we were doing in high school. Don't ask me why. So my nickname for a time was Husky. There's a long line of stories attached to that name. There's an expectation, there's a person that's attached to that label. And so I'm like, that's an identity that not only did I create, but the people around me who called me that created that identity. They created that persona. So I'm like, when you give a baby that name, you're helping create that identity. That's part of an identity. That's the only part of their identity that you give them is that name. So when a person gets old enough to realize that that's not the identity they want anymore, they change it. And the family members may get upset, and you get upset because you gave them that identity. But what you have to understand is that maybe that's not the identity that they have. So to me, changing my name is that I'm giving myself this identity. This is an identity that I want. This isn't the identity that you and my aunt and my family and everybody else has given me. This is not the expectations that you placed on that name. This is a clean slate. This is the name I chose, and this is the person I want to be. When it's like, this is a label, this is an expectation, these are things that it feels a certain way to me, and that was what I wanted. It's just like when you name that baby. I'm like, but like I said, I'm like, it's still your kid, or still your friend, still your lover, but that name that you gave them, whether it's a pet name, a nickname, that name has something attached to it. And it's not that they're running away from it, but it's not something that they want or need anymore. And so they're trying to create a new name with new memories and a new journey to forage. And they want you to be a part of that. But you also have to be willing to accept that the identity that you helped create is no longer there. It's not, it's no longer the identity they wish to be associated by. So that is why a name is so important, because a name symbolizes an identity. And when your parents give you a name, they are basically starting off by, they're giving you a starting identity. Now it's time for me to create my own identity. And it's very hard for me to create an identity that is associated with that name. And I'm like, it's not even just personal. I'm like, it's that in the workplace, people know that name and they associate it with certain pop culture references. So now I cannot run away from that, because people now assume that I do the same things that these people do. And I'm like, I don't want that. I mean, granted, with Dexter, the only thing I ever get is that TV show Dexter, which I never watched, and Dexter's Laboratory, which is pretty funny. And most people who know me are like, oh, you're really smart. I used the word demeanor, and my coworkers were like 20 and 21, are like, you need to stop using them big words. And no offense, people like, oh, I must have been black. No, they were white. They were just funny as ever. Like, demeanor isn't even an SAT word. Like, come on now. So, but I'm like, that's really what I wanted you guys to understand, is that I understand it's hard that a name is changing, but it is an identity thing. And when you don't accept someone's name change, it is basically saying that you're not accepting their change in identity. You're not accepting them for their core person. And I'm like, I understand pronouns are hard, okay, especially if you spend your entire life with someone, but more or less, that name, that identity needs to be created on their own. So I hope this helps explain something, and if you know someone who's having a hard time, I hope this helps. That's the best way that I can explain why a name is so important. So I hope things work out for you guys, and I'll talk to you guys later. Good night.